you can take my heels off.
On the short side?
There's a lot of short sides.
The one day.
This is about you, so you should be in the middle here.
Oh yeah, speakers risers.
Come up on the riser.
All right.
I'm still tall.
Now I'm almost as tall as Jim.
All right, I'm Senator Karin Housley. Thank you all for coming. In response to the Russian invasion of Ukraine, we have legislation for sanctions against Russia. This is important for Minnesota to send a message that we stand firmly with Ukraine and strongly condemn the Russian government's actions. My heart breaks for the Ukrainian families who are suffering right now. This bill demonstrates that we stand with Ukraine and with the free democracies across the world who have a right to exist in peace. What our bill does, it will prohibit Minnesota's State Board of Investment, SBI, from investing in companies based in Russia, as well as those Russian securities or currency. It'll also codify what the governor said the other day, his executive order, which bars Minnesota's state government from contracting with Russian-based companies. It is our hope that we will pass this bill quickly and make it law and end all financial support of Minnesota in Russia. Next up, we have Representative Jordan.
Hello, I'm State Representative Sydney Jordan, and I have the honor of serving House District 60A. Like many of us, I have spent the past few weeks watching the coverage of Russia's violent invasion of Ukraine, and my heart is aching not only for the families attempting to flee or the brave Ukrainians fighting for their home, but also for my Ukrainian American neighbors, of which we are so fortunate to have so many in Northeast Minneapolis. They have been watching their ancestral homeland, a place where many still have family and friends, be torn apart by an autocratic regime run by Vladimir Putin. I'm joined today by members of both parties and both legislative houses to show that Minnesota stands firmly with Ukraine and our 17,000 Ukrainian American neighbors living in our state. To show solidarity, we are introducing this legislation to divest Minnesota's state pension fund from Russia, which is estimated to be worth $53 million before Russia's invasion, and to codify Governor Walz's executive order barring Minnesota from contracting with Russian companies. In an author's amendment, I also plan to include the Republic of Belarus in this measure. We join an ever-growing number of democracies in standing up to this evil committed in Ukraine, not only because standing against tyranny is always the right thing to do, but because we can't allow a single cent from our state to line the pockets of oligarchs and despots who sanction the murder of innocent citizens. It is not every day that you see this particular group of legislators pushing the same bill. So I would really like to thank the Minnesota Ukrainian community and the Minnesota Ukrainian American Advocacy Committee and all of the advocates you're going to hear from today for getting us together and rallying around this legislation to ensure that Minnesota does its part to bring about what is hopefully a swift end to this terrible war and world peace. With that, I would like to introduce two extraordinary people who inspired this legislation and are willing to share their stories. Please listen to Luda Anastabskiewski and Asiya Michalenko-Sturgill. Thank you for your time today.
I'm Luda Anastasievsky, Minnesota Ukrainian American Committee Chair. The Advocacy Committee represents the Ukrainian American community in the state of Minnesota and coordinates Ukrainian community's advocacy work. As you heard already, there are over 17,000 Ukrainians in the state of Minnesota. I'm grateful to Mr. Roberts and the Jewish Community Relations Council of Minnesota and the Dakotas for spearheading this effort to introduce the bill. Thank you, Senator Housley and Representative Jordan, for your authorship of this important legislation, as well as Senator Dietzick and Representative Nash for your co-sponsorship of the bill. As a Minnesotan and Ukrainian American, I'm honored and privileged to speak to you today. I was born in Mariupol and spent my childhood and youth there. I came to Minnesota in 1990. I have been calling it home since. I have two daughters who were born and raised here. I am an educator, and I have been teaching in Minnesota public schools for the last 30 years. Since the renewed aggression of the Russian Federation, my friends and co-workers have been asking me how I'm doing. I want to use my Minnesota nice answer and say I'm fine, but I'm not. Honestly, I can barely function. I feel very anxious and worried because my family and friends in Mariupol are in the city under siege. I do not know how any of them are doing, and even if they're alive. Why does Russia want to capture Mariupol? Mariupol is a large port city on the Sea of Azov, an industrial powerhouse with 2 or 3 largest steel works in Ukraine. And Mariupol's geographical position makes it strategically important. Capturing the city would enable Russian invasion forces to create a land bridge from the eastern borders of Ukraine down to Crimea and to secure control of the Ukrainian coast along the Sea of Azov. Currently, Mariupol is enduring its 3rd week of heavy shelling. According to Doctors Without Borders, the humanitarian situation in Mariupol is catastrophic. There is no heat, power, water in the city. There is no communications as well. Food and medicine are rapidly disappearing. Yesterday, a maternity ward in the city clinic was destroyed by direct hit. Apparently, from what I've heard from press, 3 people were killed and 17 people were injured, pregnant women, mothers, and doctors. Due to constant shelling, there is no possibility to bury the dead and know for sure how many people died at this point. I have childhood friends, cousins, nieces, and nephews who live in Mariupol. I haven't been able to get in touch with them since February 27th. Every moment when I attend to my daily chores, I think of them. I take a shower and I think they haven't had water for 12 days by now. I fall asleep in my warm bed wondering how they survive without heat and whether they'll be able to sleep knowing that bombs could fall any moment. I make breakfast and wonder if they are cooking outside in the cold over an open fire. That's why this bill is very important to me. Russia has to be stopped. Our state can't provide defensive weapons, but it can fight back and defend Ukraine. Minnesota can help Ukraine by divesting its pension fund of all Russian assets. Our state should not financially support a government that invades its neighbors without provocation and targets innocent civilians as part of its military strategy. The Russian government must face consequences for invading Ukraine and senselessly killing thousands of innocent Ukrainian people. Also, this bill affects me personally. It involves my pension money. As a public employee, I don't want my money go to Putin to fuel his war machine. Russia must feel economic pressure if we hope to stop this war and deter future aggression. I urge you to pass the bill and use the financial mechanisms at your disposal to put pressure on Putin's regime so that Ukrainians can have a sovereign state and go back to their normal lives. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Asya Mikhailenko-Sturgill, and I'm a volunteer in the Minnesota Ukrainian American Advocacy Committee, as well as a native of Kiev. I moved to Minnesota in 1992 with my parents, sister, and maternal grandparents, while my father's family remained in Ukraine. Over the last 2 weeks, my heart keeps breaking for my homeland. Since the war broke out, my uncle's family has relocated to be with my 93-year-old grandmother in central Kiev, as she requires round-the-clock care. My aunt has been spending her days volunteering with a neighborhood mutual aid network run out of a repurposed bar, and spends her time cooking for soldiers, guarding the neighborhood against infiltrator gangs trying to assassinate government officials, combing stores on foot for food and medications whose supply is quickly drying up, and cleaning and making the place hospitable for anyone in need of rest. At night, my aunt and cousin shelter from air raids in the bar turned bomb shelter, though she tells me that the air raids have become so frequent, they've started to tune out the sirens. Meanwhile, my uncle remains at my grandmother's bedside as she can no longer walk on her own. They report high spirits and remain resolute that they will persevere. I worry for the precarious position due to my grandmother's limited mobility if things were to get worse and require them to flee. Several family friends on the outskirts of Kiev have already stopped responding to calls and messages for several days after reporting fighting around them, and certain suburbs are out of electricity and water. I see this bill as a way the Minnesota legislature can take responsibility to cut commercial ties with the Russian government and hold them accountable for these horrendous acts of war, so that my family and friends can go back to living their lives in peace. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Cherie Dietzick, and I represent Northeast and Southeast Minneapolis, Cedar Riverside, and Seward. Historically and presently, my district has been the home to many immigrants. You can eat your way around the world in my district. Many Eastern Europeans, including Ukrainians and my Polish grandparents, immigrated here in the 19th century, and others came after the Second World War. I proudly represent a vibrant Ukrainian American community. My district is home to the Ukrainian American Community Center, as well as two prominent Ukrainian churches, St. Constantine Ukrainian Catholic Church and St. Michael's and St. George Ukrainian Orthodox Church. My community is deeply rooted in the rich cultural traditions of the Ukrainian people, the food, the music, the dancing, and the intricately designed Easter eggs. I am here to support this bipartisan effort to stand with my colleagues against Vladimir Putin's unprovoked war against Ukraine, Putin's unprovoked war against democracy. I'm here today to speak on behalf of my neighbors who have family members in Ukraine who understand the very real threat the Russian invasion poses to the safety of Ukraine and to the safety of the world. Many of my Ukrainian Minnesotan neighbors and friends have expressed overwhelming fear, sorrow, and grief for their loved ones in Ukraine who are experiencing firsthand this barbaric invasion. One friend was panicked when she couldn't get a hold of her husband, who was in Kiev, after the invasion began. He fortunately got out, but others have not. I've heard from many constituents who have told me their loved ones in Ukraine are struggling. They don't want to leave their home, and if they do, where do they go? They are scared, but they are strong. That's why we stand in solidarity with Ukraine and in support of this legislation to impose sanctions against Russia. We are Democrats and we are Republicans. We don't always agree, but we are united in wanting to see an end to Putin's atrocities and aggression. When the lives of innocent people are threatened by a totalitarian regime, we must stand boldly against it and stand in defense of democracy. To the millions of Ukrainians and their families whose lives have been upended in the last 2 weeks, we see you, we support you, and we will continue to stand with you as you bravely oppose this war against you. We pray for peace. Slava Ukraini.
Well, good afternoon, and thank you for being here. My name is State Representative Jim Nash. I represent District 47A, which is Western Carver County, and it is indeed rare that DFLers and Republicans stand shoulder to shoulder on any issue, but this is an important one because we are standing up and saying that we do not want the state of Minnesota to have any interaction with Russia and Vladimir Putin's regime. And I have a different perspective of this, having myself been to Russia on humanitarian relief work 3 times. And as I went throughout the countryside, I saw exactly what sort of a regime he ran. His care for his people is virtually nil. And when we would go to orphanages, we would see that the average orphan was afforded maybe 10 cents per day from the state government. So the lack of care that he has for his own orphans, and now he's making new ones out of families in Ukraine. So I, for one, think that this is a very important piece of legislation. I serve as the minority lead on state government finance. We routinely talk about these various funds, and I think that this is an important message that we can send to the world, that we can send to other Minnesotans, that we will not want to profit off of his warmongering, and that we do not want to have a formalized relationship with this as Minnesotans and as legislators. And to follow up on Senator Dietzick, Slava Ukraini.
Good afternoon. My name is Ethan Roberts, and I'm the Director of Government Affairs for the Jewish Community Relations Council of Minnesota and the Dakotas, JCRC. And it's my privilege to be here today with our Executive Director, Steve Hunnigs, my colleague, Anthony Sussman, and our Board Chair, Judy Cook. I've worked at this for 14 years at the legislature, and I've never had the privilege of being part of such an important bill, such a bipartisan, bicameral bill, and I really give tremendous credit to Senator Housley and Representative Jordan, and to Representative Nash and Representative New, who's the lead House Republican on the bill, and Leader Franzen and Senator Dietzick, as well as leadership who's here today behind me. All the leaders have support this bill, and of course to the governor, who's encouraged us, who's encouraged the legislature to do this. But mostly, I want to give thanks to the Minnesota Ukrainian community. Their bravery, their resilience, it's stunning, it's inspiring, and the trust that they have placed in our organization, it's humbling. And this is justice. This is what we do. This is what we try to do, at least. And so it's very important for our Jewish community, for our organization. We don't just speak about remembering the lessons of the Holocaust. We are coming up on Yom HaShoah, but making sure it's not repeated, right, on the fields, in the streets of Europe again. And so I just want to thank everyone in the media for caring. I know it's hard watching it on CNN or whatever you watch, and people have to keep caring. They have to keep covering this. We have to keep the pressure on, and that's what we're here to do. And I'm looking forward to this bill being going through the House and Senate and signed by the governor very, very soon. So thank you, everyone, for being here. And I'm sure if you have any questions from our Ukrainian leaders or any of the legislators, they'd be happy to answer them.
Senator Housley, I guess, how soon after the invasion did Minnesota legislators start thinking of ways that it could, combat or do its own sort of sanctions? Was there a known awareness of the investment in the state pension and kind of just that process?
Thank you. It was just a couple of days after when Representative Jordan and Ethan got a hold of me and said, we have to do something, this is what we need to do. And then it was a day later that the governor came out with his executive orders. Right after.
I woke up the morning after the Russian invasion, and I watched TV, and instead of feeling helpless, I knew that we had power in Minnesota to do something about this. My colleague, Representative Hornstein, and I acknowledged the atrocities on the floor of the House, and since then we've been working and researching ways to go about sanctioning Russia for these atrocities. And so this work began pretty much immediately as soon as this invasion started happening.
Representative Nash, what's the practical impact of what you're proposing to do here? What impact do you hope it will have? 53 million for Russia is a drop in the bucket. Is this more about a message, or what's the practical impact?
Well, Tom, I think every dollar matters, and I think it stands for what do these people behind me and all 201 of us here stand for. So if it's 53 million, 530 million, or $53, I think that the message is the appropriate one, that sovereignty matters, that you cannot invade a sovereign nation and depose a democratically elected government. And once again, I would imagine that all my colleagues feel the same way. This is not right. This is the wrong thing to be doing. You see regularly Vladimir Putin is giving directions to bomb maternity hospitals. We have to stand up against that. And again, regardless of the dollar amount, Tom, I think the message has to be, we will not be a part of this. We are not going to support a regime that does this. And that message is very clear.
Is there anything else after this, once this passes, and given what the governor has done, Is there anything else that the Minnesota legislature or the state of Minnesota can do in this, or is this pretty much the full arsenal?
I think there's a number of things we can do. This is the thing that we could all agree on and saw as the most immediate in our position as state legislators. We're of course looking at our state budget. And so I think there's any number of things that we could do, and we're exploring those options now. I think to really underscore Representative Nash's point, our budgets and where Minnesota spends our dollars is our morals. It's what we stand for. So even, I liked his analogy about $53. That is $53 too much spent investing in this autocratic regime. And we can spend this money, and $53 million combined with all of the democracies of the world standing up and making a change makes a big difference in the Russian Federation's budget, and it's the least we can do.
You mentioned that was 53 million at the start of this. Do we even know what that is now? I mean, obviously the Russian economy
Is in a different spot.
Yeah, right.
No, these are the most recent numbers. Obviously in war, accurate accounting from the Russian regime is not always easy to come by.
And is it direction to immediately unload this? Or I know in the past in some of these divestments, it's been over time to kind of soften the blow to the pension counts.
So the bill that I have currently drafted says that no later by August 1st of 2022, the State Board of Investment will make its best efforts. And so this will be that at least 50%, and then for the state investments part, at least 50% of the holdings in the company will be removed, of companies that are tied to the Russian regime will be removed by 9 months, and then 100% by 15 months. There's also additionally a prohibition on new acquisitions and investments into Russia and held companies.
Is that 15 months from August, or would that be from bill passage?
Bill passage.
Bill passage.
And I see there are House leaders here. When does this land on the floor to get that clock running?
Well, I think it's important to take the bill through the process and make sure that everything that's in the bill makes sense and that we're moving at the absolute fastest timeline possible. It sounds like very responsible drafting and maybe even conservative on the timeline. And so as the bill goes through the committee process, we'll see if we can amend and expedite that timeline so that we're acting absolutely as quickly as possible. But I think it is important to take the bill through the process and have those conversations in committee so that we can work to stay aligned with the Minnesota Senate and make sure we're airing the language and hearing concerns so that we're all working together.
What's your best guess?
7 to 10 days.
What is the ban on state agencies having contracts with Russian entities permanent, or how long will that ban last if it's codified?
As drafted, it is permanent. It can always, of course, be undone by an act of the legislature.
Luda mentioned that she's kind of on both sides of this coin. You've got the interest of your home country and your people that you know there, but you're also drawing off this fund. Can you talk a little bit about that you don't care whether there's a financial sacrifice by unloading these stocks? I mean, it sounds like you've already factored that in.
So let me understand your question correctly. You want my opinion as a public employee and...
You kind of got both sides of the coin here.
Right, and this bill is important to me on exactly, like, part of me as a Ukrainian wants, of course, to stop the war immediately. And because it's so unjust, it's so cynical, this destruction of innocent population of the whole country is just so wrong that all measures that can be taken should be taken immediately. And I'm so glad to see our legislators standing right next to us, with us. They stand with Ukraine. And I'm very grateful and I'm proud that I'm a Minnesotan and that these people represent me and Ukrainians in Minnesota. And of course, as public employee, that would be unconscionable to have these funds continue be part of the Russian funds and having anything to do with Russia, state aggressor and a murderer.
And I will also add that I have spoken to many public employees and the unions that represent them, and they are in support of this bill.
Luda, if you don't
Yes.
mind, would you just reflect on the last couple of weeks and perhaps the frustration that you felt over what can Minnesota do, what can we do from here, and perhaps you found an outlet of what Minnesota can do here?
Governor's office reached out to our community, and my colleague and I from our Minnesota Ukrainian American Advocacy Committee met with him last week at St. Constantine's Church, and we brought up some things that we would like to see happening. And we are currently in touch with the governor's office, and we would like to start some initiatives in regard to supporting refugees. And the governor said that Minnesota is open to accepting refugees from Ukraine, but now we need to, move and have concrete steps in that direction. So we'll be working on that. There's also a possibility of creating statewide support for procuring medicine and sending it to Ukraine. We have lists from the from the Ukrainian Ministry of Health. So we know what's needed, and if we could have support, state support in regard to that, that would be great. So those are kind of the two things that we're focusing on right now.
Can anyone comment on why, the governor is a board member of the State Board of Investments? Why is it, he described it as prudent for the legislature to be the one that takes action on this? Can anyone comment on why sort of a bill and legislative action is needed?
Maybe Ethan can as well, but, so the State Board of Investment has a fiduciary obligation to, the recipients of the state funds to return the highest, return that they can get, regardless of the investment. So just like, in Sudan and South Africa, Iran, the legislature has directed the State Board of Investment to take an action that prioritizes morality over economic returns.
Are these ever revisited? I mean, the South Africa one is probably, 30 years old by now?
This is where I'm going to be proven wrong. I don't think the South African one is still effective. I know the one for Sudan is, as is the one for Iran, as is the one for Russia. Look, it would be wonderful if Russia had a new government, right? And they would make, I don't know how you make amends for this, but, I'm trying to think about, obviously, certain countries, let's say Germany, right, isn't the same country it was after, right, okay? And so it would make no sense to be sanctioning Germany based upon their conduct in World War II. I'm not trying to exactly analogize this, but the best one that came off the tip of the tongue. The point is that, betting on Russia to become better doesn't sound like a very good bet in the near future, right? This hasn't just happened, right? I mean, maybe people are just paying attention to this in the last 12 days. There was Crimea, right? There's Aleppo in Syria. There's Grozny. I mean, does Grozny feel like ancient history? So Georgia, right? I mean, the litany goes on. And so, yeah, should Russia prove itself to be the kind of country that doesn't just invade its peaceful neighbors? Should Russia prove itself to be the kind of country that doesn't target maternity hospitals? I will lead the charge to rescind this statute, okay? I look forward to doing that. That would be wonderful. But until Russia changes, the concern here is if we set a short timeline for this, perhaps the world's focus may drift. But the reconstruction, right? I mean, that's going to take years. The lives that never can be put, the people who are dead, they're never coming back. And so it is appropriate, given the magnitude of this situation, given this track record of this regime, that the onus be on Russia to change before the law does.
But I think your point with South Africa is these aren't permanent.
The president, according to the text of the bill, and it's similar to what we have in statute for Iran, I know for sure, if the president of the United States basically says that these state statutes, because Minnesota is not alone in this, are inconsistent with U.S. foreign policy, they fall away. And so imagine, whatever future president, there's a different regime in Moscow, sure, the president could order that. We also, as Representative George said, have the option to rescind it ourselves.
Luda, you mentioned refugees, welcoming refugees here. Do you have any kind of a number that you're talking to the governor about or anything?
We do not have exact numbers yet. We're still in the process of finding out more information. Sorry, we don't have the exact numbers yet, and it's it's in flux right now. We're finding out more information.
You also mentioned that another thing is medical, medicine. Are there other areas that you're also pushing, or are those the two main components?
We might be looking into protective body gear because Minnesota is the state that produces them too, so.
Representative Jordan, can you talk a little bit more about your author's amendment to include Belarus and why you think they should be included in this legislation?
Yes, it's pretty clear that by allowing the Russian Federation to use Belarus to invade Ukraine and also the financial support that they have given this regime, that they are also part of this aggression against the people of Ukraine.
Thank you.
Did you know the kind of support you have among colleagues, that it begins to get a little bit afield of the U.S. policy and of what other states have done?
What other states have done?
Yeah, have other states sanctioned Belarus as well? I'm sorry, maybe I'm.
I believe so. I know that other governors have done executive orders that have included Belarus. I'm not sure what the particulars of what other state legislatures have done, but it's pretty clear that these two countries are hand in hand.
Thanks.
All right.
Thank you.
Spellings of your two names?
Thank you.
One at a time,
Up to the mic.
and spell them slowly, please.
Yes. My last name is spelled A, N as in Nancy, A, S as in Sam, T as in Tom, A, Z as in zebra, I, E, V as in Victor, S, K, Y. Half of the alphabet.
And Luda is spelled
sorry.
L-U-D-A.
Yes, my first name.
Pronounce your full name.
Okay, Luda Anastasievsky. Thank you.
Best of luck, Tom.
Okay.
Pronounce it and then spell it.
Sure. Asya Mikhailenko Sturgill, A-S-Y-A, pronounced like Nadia, same sort of accent. Mikhailenko, M-I-K-H-A-I-L-E-N-K-O, Sturgill, S-T-U-R-G-E-L-L.
Do you hyphenate those two?
No, thank you.
It's two different words, though?
Two different words.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Nash, we got yours.
Mine's easy.
Okay, I gotta go vote.
God bless you. We're praying for you and your family.
No, she's obviously just.
I can tell there's a pair of had that question highlighted before it was asked.
Yep.
So I'm super.
Say special prayers for your mother.